8 months ago, I did a podcast entitled Not Ideal for Drake Maye. And I had the thumbnail that went along with it that said, this could be bad. I was given my prediction as to what was going to go down with New England quarterback and first round selection Drake Maye after Jerod Mayo was hired as the head coach. On Sunday, yesterday, and following New England's last game, head coach Jerod Mayo was fired. This is QB Unfiltered, my take. I hate to be right.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up.
Okay, so when that show dropped 8 months ago, I got barbecued in the comments. I was called and labeled as the R word. People didn't like that I called the reporter at the introductory press conference a woke reporter. Some guys were really concerned about the fact that I questioned Jerod Mayo's thinking when the guy that just hired him, Robert Kraft, sitting right next to him at that press conference, said that he didn't see color when he was hiring coaches. He was hiring the best guy to come in and coach the New England Patriots. And without batting an eye, Jerod Mayo follows that up with, well, I do see color. Without doing that, we can't address the topic of racism. Now, I'm paraphrasing him a little bit here. We'll see the clip. And I also got slammed for asking what the hell was Mayo talking about with diversity in the Patriots locker room. Okay, so here's a little flashback to the introductory press conference with Jerod Mayo and owner Robert Kraft.
Question first, Robert. Jerod said that being the first black coach was important to him. Curious, what does it mean to you?
Let me say this to you. I'm really colorblind in terms of, I know what I feel like on Sunday when we lose. So I want to get the best people I can get. I chose the best head coach for this organization. He happens to be a man of color, but I chose him because I believe he's best to do the job.
I appreciate, Thunder and the organization selecting me to be a black head coach. I would say what Thunder just talked about, that was in the locker room. You want your locker room to be pretty diverse, and you would want the world to look like that. What I will say, though, is I do see color, because I believe if you don't see color, you can't see racism. And whatever happens, black, white, disabled person, I've always, even someone with disabilities, I always, for the most part, people are like, when they're young, they kind of make the spot hot. Younger people know what that means. But what I would say is, no, I want you to be able to go up to those people and really understand those people. So it goes back to whatever it is, black, white, yellow, it really doesn't matter, but it does matter so we can try to fix a problem that we all know we have.
When he was done talking here, I just basically, when I picked my jaw up off the floor, I went, what in the hell is he doing? So most head coaches, when they are hired in the NFL, they thank the owner and then they give their vision for what they see with this football team offensively and defensively and just the overall path that they're going to take with the team. They do not get up there and go on a pontification about race and diversity and all of that stuff. And so, that was a major red flag on day one. And Mayo hadn't even started coaching yet. And I just thought to myself, man, this is not going to be a great situation for Mr. Drake Maye. I was also criticized for questioning Jerod Mayo's credentials and his experience, and also the fact that either he or somebody in the front office hired a guy to coach quarterbacks and to coach their investment first-round pick, Drake Maye, hiring a coach that had coached quarterbacks in the NFL for exactly one season. He was a tight ends coach. And this show was really an extension of another show I did right around the same time, right after the draft, where I posed 3 questions about the quarterbacks taken in the first round, who was going to the best situation, who was going to the most interesting situation, and who was going to make the fastest impact. All right. That was all in one show. And then the fourth one was who was going to the worst situation. And I took that and did it as its own standalone. And that was the Jerod Mayo, Drake Maye show. But this was pretty easy for me to see. I knew what was going to go down this season. When he was done with that press conference, my first thought was, that's not how a dynamic leader of men talks. That's not how a head coach of a group of professional football players talks. And then it proceeded to get worse. And so again, it wasn't surprising to me that when training camp rolled around, Jerod Mayo made the statement that the New England Patriots were going to be more of a player-run team, right? The players were going to have more of a say in the decisions that went on within the football facility. And, player empowerment with football, player empowerment basically with any sports is the kiss of death. Okay, and then as we jumped into the season and as it started to go, reports started leaking out that New England's locker room was really toxic. And again, that's not a big surprise to me either. I've discussed this in other shows. We need to talk about it here real quick. And I'm going to use football for an example. With any football team, you have got an environment in that locker room that is totally separate from everything else within that football program or organization, because the locker room is run by, I call them alphas, right? You've got a handful of guys in every locker room that basically set policy, they set expectations, and they set attitude. And you've got alphas that do it in a positive way, or you've got teams where they have the alphas who go the other direction, right? And if you don't have strong leadership in that locker room, a lot of times it turns into a toxic place, and that almost 100% of the time manifests itself out on the field when it's game day. And if you've got a head coach that does not have any experience dealing with this type of stuff, which Jerod Mayo definitely fits that category, no experience as a head coach, no experience as a coordinator. When you have that situation and you've got weak leadership in the locker room and a head coach who cannot get control of that stuff and straighten it out, you're going to run into what we ran into this year with the Patriots. And again, that all starts at the top with the head coach. The vision, the discipline goes down to his assistant coaches, and the players are down below those two levels. Expectations, discipline, this is the way we're going to do it. This is what we will not tolerate and put up with. And that didn't exist this year with New England. It also seemed that every time Mayo got in front of reporters, he said something that was either cringe or wasn't factual, or again, wasn't the example coming from a dynamic leader. In a lot of those cases, he had to walk back what he said, a day or two later. And again, that doesn't promote confidence within the locker room with the head coach when he's constantly doing that. And as I said earlier, I don't know how much input he had in selecting his coaching staff, or if this was done with their general manager and front office guys. I don't know. I don't know if Robert Kraft had any say-so in it or his son, but Mayo was surrounded by a lot of other coaches with inexperience, and that's a bad recipe for success in the NFL. The NFL, obviously is the top rung of football competition in the country. And you got to have coaches that have been around the block and know what they're doing. And the biggest thing with the coaching experience, besides the X's and O's knowledge, is the authority and the command that experienced coaches project to their players, right? And it always shows on the field. You can always tell, there are a couple of different things that I've always said will tell you exactly what's going on behind closed doors. When you get a team on the field that plays soft, they play undisciplined, they make a ton of mental mistakes, they do a ton of, make a ton of stupid penalties, right? Selfish penalties. They quit playing. They have poor effort. That can be traced back to toxic locker rooms, and you can almost always trace that back to the coaching staff and the lack of expectation and driving that home with the players and demanding excellence. Young, inexperienced coaches, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's a confidence thing or what it is, but they don't drive that home with their players. Plus, we're in an era now, which I think is really hurting football with coaches where, and it goes back to player empowerment again, where you don't want to hurt players' feelings. That is such a line of horse shit. Now, I've said this on other shows. I'm going to say it here because, man, does this really tell you where we're at in the NFL today? Last year, Warren Sapp was on Jason Whitlock's podcast, and they were talking about the NFL, and they were talking about the players in the NFL today, right? And Sapp said this, which I found to be so right on the money and so telling. He said, coaches today in the NFL cannot coach players hard, because if they do, the next day that player is going to show up to practice in a green jersey. Now, a green jersey in the NFL means you're hurt and you can't practice. And Sapp said, if you get on a player, if you reprimand a player, if you discipline a player, the next day they're going to show up to practice in a green jersey, and they're going to have their psychiatrist standing right behind them. If you've got a locker room full of guys like that, and you've got a head coach who is pandering to that attitude, that's when you run into 4-13 seasons, right? And then as New England was playing this year, I was checking in on podcasts coming out of Boston that covered just the Patriots, and every week they were saying the same stuff, that the players looked like they weren't being developed. Okay. And we are not seeing player development. Well, that's on the coaches, right? That is on the coaches. They also further went with, not only are we not seeing player development, they look ill prepared at times, right? Scheme wise, assignment wise, confusion wise. And again, that comes down to the coaching staff. Okay. At the end of the day, the guy that deserves the blame for this is owner Robert Kraft. Doesn't it seem like it was just yesterday when guys like Belichick and Brady were winning Super Bowl trophies year after year after year? New England was the organization that every other team in the league was trying to emulate, right? The New England Patriot way. That was the saying. And so that really lets you know just exactly how important and crucial those two guys, Belichick and Brady, were. You can say what you want to get about Bill Belichick. He's a great football coach. And what makes him great is he's old school and he believes in smart, fundamental football. And he doesn't take any bullshit from players. And you pair that with Tom Brady, and I talked about the alphas in the locker room. Brady was one of those handful of alphas that ran the show there in the locker room. And you all know the expectation level and competitive level for Tom Brady. And the thing is, with positive alphas in the locker room and negative alphas, the positive guys step on the bullshit going on with bad attitudes, right? And they get things straightened out with players that need to be straightened out, because they know what it takes to win. And they also know that they need all 53 guys in that locker room to be going in the same direction. Okay. On the flip side of that, you've got what goes on in New England, what went on in New Orleans locker room last year, again, with, let's say, less than dynamic leadership from the head coach last year with the New Orleans Saints. You had the same kind of crap going on, where the alphas in New Orleans locker room were the same type of dudes that are in New England's locker room. I used to call them locker room lawyers, the guys that have theories about everything, right? And all of those theories are negative and destructive. And without any strong voices in that locker room, that shit starts to permeate throughout the entire locker room. And again, what happens in there carries out onto the field, and what you see on game day is a result of that community and that environment in the locker room. But Brady, he was one of those guys that had New England going in the right direction, along with the guy at the top, Bill Belichick. But I think towards the end of Belichick and Brady's run, Robert Kraft started to believe that he was the guy responsible for the dynasty or dynasties. They had two of them, right? And that's always a bad deal for an NFL football team when the owner starts to think that he's responsible and the head coach is a guy that they can toss out of there because they can bring anybody in. And as long as the owner's overseeing things, they're going to be okay. And so towards the end of Belichick and Brady's tenure in New England, you started having these little whispers coming out and these little leaks coming out that some of the players that they had in that program weren't real enamored with Belichick's style of coaching. Again, we go back to I'm going to put a green jersey on with my psychiatrist standing right behind me. If you coach me hard, if you make it so that I have to play at a high level every day, if you demand that I have to do shit right, if you demand accountability from me. The guys that are negative dudes in a toxic locker room, they don't like to do any of that stuff. And so they started to have some of these little whispers that maybe the Patriots way wasn't the way for the new player empowerment. And I think that Kraft started listening to that stuff, and then he started getting maybe some bad advice from people within his organization. And now Belichick and Brady are out. And Kraft, after Belichick left, made it be known that they were going to go in a different direction. It was going to be a more gentle approach to coaching football in New England. This may blow some guys' minds out there, but the gentle approach with football or any type of competition really usually doesn't work. Okay. And that's what Kraft wanted. He got Belichick and Brady out of there. He got his guy in, Jerod Mayo, and set sail for this last season. And at the end of the day, Robert Kraft, I think you really have to be careful what you wish for and who you're listening to. Okay, so getting back to Jerod Mayo. Now, the other aspect that really was loud and clear on his hiring was this. He didn't have any practical experience at all to jump into this head coaching job. He had been an assistant coach. That was it. Okay. In my opinion, you have to be a coordinator before you can be a head coach, an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator. So it's position coach, coordinator, head coach. That's the natural progression with coaching, and being a coordinator is such a valuable experience, and it really does prepare you for everything you're going to face as a head coach. Okay. The coordinator is the head coach for that side of the ball, right? The coordinator is in charge of the assistant coaches on that side of the ball. So let's say Jerod Mayo was the D coordinator for the Patriots. He's got the D-line coach, the linebacker coach, and the DB coach all working under him. He's in charge of those guys. He's got to set a course for them. He's got to make sure they're doing stuff the right way. And a coordinator is responsible for the players on his side of the ball. Just like a head coach is responsible for everybody in that locker room, the coordinator is like a mini head coach, right? The coordinator also has to be able to handle player issues on that side of the ball. And besides the X's and O's part of it, at least my experience in coaching, player issues and handling egos and handling discipline problems, that takes up a large part of your job description as a coach. You have to have experience because there's an art to it. right? There is an art to it. There's a fine line that you walk as a coach with being a hard disciplinarian and being a guy that is understanding of what's going on with players, right? There's that fine line you walk. Coordinators have to deal with that on their side of the ball. And then coordinators have to have a vision and a plan to carry out. They've got to sell that and make sure it's done by the coaches working under them on that side of the ball, and that it's carried out and executed by the players playing for them on that side of the ball. All of those job descriptions for a coordinator make it perfect to step in and be the head coach after that. Jerod Mayo had none of that. None. That was a red flag for me. But at the end of the day, Jerod Mayo was the guy. And this tells you how bad it was this season. The fact that not only they fired him at the end of his first season, right? But it was like immediately after the final whistle of the last game. They were done with Jerod Mayo. Usually you give a guy a couple of years, maybe 3 years at the most. I think the fact that there's some dudes out there floating around that are possible head coaching hires that are out there, I think that may have forced Kraft's hand a little bit in the fact that he couldn't miss this window to go out and get one of these two guys. But they're moving on from Mayo. And I think what Robert Kraft needs to do, I think he needs to clean house within the Patriots organization. They need to get some football guys in there, not only the coaching part of it, but the general manager, front office guys that make good decisions and understand how a football team works, what a head coach needs, right? Go out and get the players that are not only great players, but great in the locker room, because I'm telling you, that makes a huge difference. Okay, thanks for listening today. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you thought or think of the situation with the 2024 New England Patriots, the hiring and firing of head coach Jerod Mayo. And this is QB Unfiltered. And remember, always throw the ball short to guys who can score. See ya.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this,